The 2024 Green Bay Packers are extremely promising, and I believe they will make big progress in 2024 as a team that not only will be a dark horse that will sneak up on the competition like they did in 2023, but could potentially become a contender, a team that punishes the NFC and the NFL. This is why I believe the Green Bay Packers will make that next step in 2024 and will punish the NFL. Gronk, spike that like button. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. Will the Packers punish the NFL in 2024? Will they be a contender? Will they win the NFC North? Let me know the answer to those questions in the comment section below and give me your response to my thoughts in this video. The Green Bay Packers in the Jordan Love era was introduced in very promising, but also extremely familiar fashion. Breaking the Cowboys' hearts, right? The Green Bay Packers of 2023 had a roller coaster season. I personally picked the Packers to make the playoffs as the number 7 seed. I got it exactly right. Now, did I think that the Packers would go into Dallas and absolutely punish the Dallas Cowboys in the wildcard round? No, I did not. I did not expect that step. And I also did not believe the Packers would turn out the way they did, with as promising of a future as I believe that they showcased in 2023. Because this was an extremely young team, led by an extremely young quarterback, an inexperienced quarterback, and a young head coach, and a bunch of young football players from the offensive side of the football, especially to the defensive side of the football. This Packer team grew like a young team should. They finished the regular season on an absolute tear. And they finished their season in general on an absolute tear with 4 wins in a row, a 4-game winning streak before going into San Francisco and nearly knocking off the San Francisco 49ers, the future NFC champs, and really the team in the NFC over the last few years. The Niners are the bar for NFC football right now. And the Green Bay Packers feel like a team that are getting extremely close. And we even saw that in the divisional round of the playoffs. This is a Packers team that beat the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving. This is a Green Bay Packers team that beat the Super Bowl champs at home on Sunday Night Football. Notice how I mentioned the time of those games. These weren't just sleeper games. These weren't games where the opponent were taking them lightly. This was Sunday Night Football at Lambeau Field against the Chiefs. This was Thanksgiving rivalry game against the Detroit Lions. This was in Dallas, wild card round, playoffs. They beat 3 of the best teams in football last year, and they got very close to beating the NFC champs in the playoffs. And why do I think the Packers will continue to progress at this rate? It starts with the quarterback. The quarterback, Jordan Love. They are led by a lovely young quarterback. And I made a video at the beginning of last season discussing my thoughts about Jordan Love and why I loved Jordan Love going into 2023. And I won't lie, at the beginning of the season, I was down on Jordan Love. I didn't like how he was playing and how he was progressing. But you have to take into account that this guy, he was playing for a large portion of the season with first-year receivers getting their feet wet in the NFL, with first-year rookie tight ends, in a pretty much new system with a play caller that hadn't yet figured out really what let him tick. Right? Matt LaFleur wasn't really familiar with Jordan Love because he hadn't really been calling plays for him for that long. He's been used to Aaron Rodgers. Christian Watson, his supposed number 1 receiver, had a couple injuries. Aaron Jones, his supposed number 1 running back and weapon, had injuries. So Jordan Love was dealing with a lot, and he already went through a ton of, I wouldn't call it controversy, but certainly a lot of ups and downs and a lot of shuffling of the lineup and definitely some issues that he had to overcome. And you look at how he performed last year, and he performed like a top 10 statistical quarterback last season. He was 9-8 as a starter. He had over 4,000 yards, 4,159 yards, a 96.1 passer rating, 32 touchdowns, which I believe was top 3 in the NFL, only 11 interceptions. And when you look deeper into his stats, 12th in PFF grade, top 12 grade right there, top 10 in passing grade, 9th in the NFL. So injuries at wide receiver, injuries at running back, young tight ends, and even an injury to Luke Musgrave as well at the tight end position. He was 3rd in big time throws, which kind of showcase as a stat from Pro Football Focus the amount of tight window throws that you're able to make down the field, big time throws, which I think is an important stat. He had a better turnover worthy play percentage, so plays that are worthy of an interception or a turnover. A better turnover worthy play percentage than Stroud, Brock Purdy, Josh Allen, or the MVP Lamar Jackson. He had an 8.9 average depth of target, which was tied for 8th in the NFL, so he wasn't just checking the ball down. He was throwing it down the field. And he threw for the 6th most first downs in football, which I think is a big stat because that showcases how much of the offense was leaning on the quarterback. And when you look at the names, the best offenses and the best quarterbacks in the league were top in that department, right? Mahomes, Allen, Brock Purdy, the 49ers offense, Dak and the Cowboys offense, and Detroit and Jared Goff. Jordan Love was right there. So you look at Jordan Love and what he was able to do in year 1 as a starter, and potentially he could become an even bigger superstar in year 2. Just by working out some of the kinks, working out some of those difficulties early in the year, this guy could throw for 38, 40 touchdowns this year. This guy could have an MVP caliber season with his arm talent, with his wicked release, with his ability to deliver from multiple platforms and angles. And I think where Jordan Love really grew was just his confidence, his ability to know where to go with the ball in the offense. Matt LaFleur's confidence in him as a passer, his confidence in the receivers that he was dealing with and understanding their body language and where to go with the ball and how to deliver a ball to a Christian Watson as opposed to a Romeo Doubs, right? So understanding his different targets. And then on top of that, he was just dealing at the end of the year. Like, he was just feeling himself. He was on fire. Like, he was a dangerous quarterback going into San Francisco where you're like, this guy could win this game. Throwing off platform, back foot, under pressure. Like, he's capable of making big time throws where he can go toe to toe with the best quarterbacks in football at his best, in my opinion. He's maybe not as consistent as those guys, but he certainly has the talent to showcase that, which makes me believe that he's a young, hungry, growing quarterback that is physically a really good player and mentally still really, really growing in his game. And even mechanically, I think still growing in his game. So that makes me believe that a lot of progress is to come for the Packer quarterback and for the Packers offensively, which I think then extends to Matt LaFleur. You pair a young, potentially promising quarterback in Jordan Love with a brilliant play caller and overall successful head coach in Matt LaFleur. He's 56-27 in his career, maybe the most underrated record among all head coaches right now in football, and he's proven he can do it without Aaron Rodgers. I thought the Packers last year were a better team than they were, without a doubt, than the 2022 team. Part of that was that Love, I think, made more big throws down the field, and part of that was the quarterback actually listened to the offensive scheme. And I will underline that point. He has a nearly 68% win percentage in the NFL, does Matt LaFleur, and I think that's going to continue because he just understands how to win games on a consistent basis, especially when it comes to playing at home. They have a great advantage when it comes to playing in Green Bay. So you give that play caller a really talented arm and a really talented quarterback that fits his system with enough mobility to get outside the pocket on his play action boot game, with enough arm strength to throw the ball from the pocket. off of different angles and platforms, and you have a potentially dangerous pairing. But then you have to get to all the dangerous weapons that come within this offense. There are weapons at every position, and there is depth. Like, this is one of these offenses that I haven't seen in a long time in terms of there's so much promising talent that we yet have really seen their ceiling. It almost reminds me of the Packers, like, nearly 15 years ago now, like getting into that 2010, 2011 range of the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers, where he had so many weapons and it felt like every week, like a new receiver would pop up and you'd be like, that guy's also really good and that guy's good. And watching the Packers last year, that was very much the vibe, especially at wide receiver, where of course you have a guy like Christian Watson, who I've named the Freak. He was my favorite wide receiver in the 2021, I believe, NFL draft class, and I made a video on it, and that's still one of my most viewed videos ever on this channel, thanks to you guys, Packers fans out there. And I believe eventually he will be a alpha number one target. Really, the only reason he hasn't been is because of injuries, but hopefully those hamstrings can strengthen up. But even last year, we saw him play really well. In his rookie year, he was graded as the 24th best receiver in football, according to PFF, and I believe he was top 10 in yards per route run. Last year, he dipped down to 59th, mostly due to the injury concerns and just the inconsistencies due to, I think, all the other targets kind of getting fed. And then Watson having to play through a lot of injury a lot of the time. But you saw peak performances from him. I believe one was against Detroit. Another was against Kansas City. And I think when the Packers were truly at their best, Christian Watson was able to be their number one target and that alpha X receiver that can get vertical, that can go down the field, can be a red zone weapon, can be a yards after catch weapon, and can be that big and fast target that he was drafted to be. And I felt like against Kansas City, he was the only receiver in the whole season to catch 2 touchdown passes. So, like, this guy has great upside, even against the best defenses in football. Then you got a guy like Romeo Doubs, who I think is more of a number 3 or a number 2. But, like, he had an amazing playoff game and a couple really good showcases in the playoffs. And down the stretch, he played really good football. He was 85th ranked by PFF in his rookie season, but he really improved as a second-year player, 39th. 6'2", 204. Another guy that can play outside, has pretty good speed, ability to get downfield, as he did in college. And he's not the most dynamic after the catch, but he's somebody that truly can win those 50-50 balls, I think, best in this group. You look at Reed, who I think was maybe the most promising guy we saw last year from this group. He was graded as the 41st best receiver, 5'11", 187, mostly a slot receiver type. But when you have Dobbs, when you have Watson, and then we'll get to Wicks, like Reed being in that slot receiver position and being the quick, shifty guy that can take some of these jet touch passes and the crossers, which he's really good at, using that quicks and after catch ability, he fits right into this skill set and to this basketball team of receivers. And then you've got Devontae Wicks, who graded as the 26th best receiver. Dontavian, I don't remember what his name is, but Wicks, 26th graded wide receiver for PFF. It was 6'1", 206. And what I love about him, he's already been mentioned alongside Davante Adams for his ability to kind of like release and run routes and the feet that he offers. I know Matt LaFleur has mentioned that he has some traits that kind of are reminiscent of Davante Adams. And Wicks also, I think, has that ability in terms of body control to make really difficult catches. And he's electric too. He didn't run a very fast 40 coming out of the draft, but he showcased an ability to kind of stop on a dime and route a guy up down the field, which is really promising. So you got 4 receivers who are still young, who are still growing. You know, Watson was kind of raw coming out of college, which is something that I really liked about him because he was going to grow. Romeo is maybe the most kind of what he is type guy, but you've got Reed and Wicks still growing as players. And then you've got guys like Melton and Heath and Toure who all kind of made plays throughout the season, especially Melton, I believe. So there's an incredible depth at this position. They've got so much speed, athleticism, quicks, size, all of it within this dimension of their receiving core that Matt LaFleur can kind of fiddle around with and work with and try to figure out who's best fit in different positions on different routes and different concepts. And it's really exciting because teams don't really know who to take away, who to shadow. You would assume it would be Watson, but like he hasn't really been consistent enough for really that to happen. but maybe he will this year. We'll see. I believe it, but we'll see. But this receiver group is really good, and I like really all of them for different reasons, and it's really promising. And then you get to the tight ends. Luke Musgrave can really run like a receiver. He is really athletic. You know, he was a multi-sport athlete in college. He gets to the NFL, and he's just a yak threat because of how quickly he can turn like a 5-yard flat into a 15-yard gain. Then you've got Kraft, who's kind of an all-around tight end, who I think is more their number 2 because he can block, he can catch, he can do all that sort of stuff. But he looked pretty good when Musgrave wasn't in there. So many different receiving weapons. You might not have the same dimension from Aaron Jones from the backfield, but then that's when you get to the running backs with Josh Jacobs and A.J. Dillon, who stuck around. And you've got 2 guys that are powerful, who can work, I believe, that interior of the run game a little bit better than Aaron Jones. And Jones is more kind of known for his outside zone stretch speed and his breakaway speed. And I don't think either of these guys have that, but they're both powerful kind of bully running backs that I think in Green Bay, it suits well because they're big, thick bodies and they wear down a defense. And when it gets cold, these 2 guys will be able to wear down defenses, which was what the intention was for A.J. Dillon coming out. But Josh Jacobs has been a leading rusher in the NFL. He's capable of carrying the load more so than an Aaron Jones. He can play on all 3 downs, and he's definitely very reliable. He's also a pretty good pass catcher, just not, I don't think, as explosive as Aaron Jones. And so I love the addition of Josh Jacobs because I think it makes them a lot more of a reliable running team and a more powerful kind of grinder of a running team, which I'm looking forward to watching when it comes to their running game and how LaFleur utilizes that. Maybe a little bit more power as opposed to finesse in their run game moving forward. And then when it comes to the Packers, you always have to speak on the offensive line. So we talked about how explosive their receiving weapons can be, how many different players can contribute for them, and how that's going to be difficult for defenses to really stop. And I really believe that Watson is going to take a major stride forward this year. I think Romeo is capable of being a number 2. I think Wicks and Reed have a lot of potential. And then the tight ends can hit you in a variety of ways and different skill sets. And the running backs are going to be really tough to stop in a more powerful way that can complement Jordan Love in the play action game. But the offensive line for Green Bay is always good, and I don't think it will be any different in 2024. First of all, they're absolute marvels at picking up offensive linemen in like the 4th to 7th rounds. They always seem to do that 3rd round. Like they're always capable of finding the tackle that can play guard but also play center. Like the Zach Tom type, who was their highest graded offensive lineman last year at 15th best for the tackle position. This is why they're, other than the injuries, David Bakhtiari, they said goodbye to him because they've got Rasheed Walker, who graded 44th. Both young tackles, both young players, both going to ascend. You look at Josh Myers, who's a solid center. I don't love him, but he's fine. He's maybe their weakest aspect, but he's still fine. He was graded as the 28th best center in football. Elton Jenkins might be their best overall offensive lineman. He has been for a couple of years. 28th overall at the guard position, can also play tackle. And then you've got maybe the guard position opposite Jenkins being a little bit kind of iffy. Not exactly sure if it will be Newman or who it will be who starts there, but maybe they go to the draft for that position. I definitely think they'll look to the draft for some depth at the offensive line. And speaking about the Packers, I think what's most promising about the Packers, just riffing here, is they have a whole nother draft to like add to all these pieces. Like we're talking about all these young players that they have signed to kind of cheap contracts. They have a whole nother draft this year where they're going to be able to draft a tackle. They're going to be able to draft a guard. They're going to be able to draft a new center, or they're going to be able to draft, probably not a receiver, probably not a running back, probably not a tight end, but they could go out there and they could address more of their defense. And that's where I want to switch paces here. I want to go from the offense, which I think will be top 10. It was last year in a variety of different statistics. They're always a very good running game. They always have great protection up front. Love was a top 3 passing touchdown type of guy. And then I think they're going to be very explosive through the passing game thanks to the speed of their receiving core and then the way that they set up their play action. But you've got Nixon at returner, who's going to be capable of big plays, especially with the new kick return rules. Don't forget about that. But defense is where I want to change pace because, yes, statistically speaking, I believe they were 12th in points against, or they were in the top 12 in some statistical categories. And on the surface, they appeared to be a good defense on the stats, but not really. I mean, they were fine. They weren't great. They weren't bad. bad necessarily, but they certainly could be a lot better. And I think the biggest addition they made this offseason was changing to a new defensive coordinator. And I think this is going to give them an entirely new perspective, an entirely new gear. I think an entirely new kind of change in scheme, right? Because you look at Joe Barry, who I've never been a fan of. I didn't really like the hire in the first place. And I don't think he's really ever turned out to be a good defensive coordinator for the Packers. And I think if you're talking about liabilities, I don't think he necessarily had a bad game, mostly due to the rain and Brock Purdy not being able to throw the ball in the San Francisco game. But now you've got, I believe, coming from Boston College, I think it's Jeff Hafley is how you pronounce his name. Correct me if I'm wrong. He is going, so I watched some videos about his scheme because I wasn't too familiar, just being honest, about his scheme coming from the college level. But, you know, he's a guy that comes from kind of that San Francisco tree because he worked for them. And so he was kind of talking about, and the way he was talking about his defense, it almost felt like he's a guy that would translate to the NFL better than the college game from a defensive standpoint because he likes to run a lot of one-high looks, a lot of one-high coverages. So what I mean by that is, let's say cover 3 is a one-high structure, cover 1 is a one-high structure, and he likes to play a lot of one-high structure while rotating to 2-high or making, you know, 1-high look like 2-high, etc. So he likes to rotate his safeties, he likes to play with the coverages and the quarterback's mind. But he also likes to play 1-high, which is similar to like what Seattle has been, what San Francisco has been, and I think what he did at Ohio State as well, or what they did at Ohio State. And he was kind of talking about how the quarterback run game is different in college and how you have to compensate for that and probably, you know, have to play more quarters coverages because of it, and have to deal with, you know, that extra man in the box, things of that nature. But now I think he's going to be more able at the NFL level to be more creative in the back end. And I think that corresponded with the big move that they made on defense, which was bringing in Xavier McKinney at the safety position, right? And Xavier McKinney is already familiar with some of the coaching staff in Green Bay from Alabama. And I believe that Xavier McKinney is one of those safeties that, hey, you want a guy that can play single high? He can do that. You want a guy that can play in the box? He can do that. You want a guy that can cover tight ends? You want a guy that can play nickel? Well, he can do all those things. And that's why, to me, he's a young but elite safety in this league. And I think this addition that they've made at the safety position has made them much better at their weakest position from last year, which was safety. And I also believe that this change in scheme and a little bit more aggression, a little bit more creativity is going to just upgrade all of these players that are already talented. I mean, how many years have we been saying with this Green Bay defense, they're really talented. They're top 10, you know, talent-wise, but they have not been able to play to that level, and some of that has been coaching, I believe. Most of it's been coaching. I mean, there's no reason that Alexander should be as inconsistent as he's been despite injuries. There's no reason why Gary should not be a top 5, top 10 edge rusher in the league consistently. There's no reason Kenny Clark should not be dominant consistently. There's no reason that guys like Devontae Wyatt, Quay Walker, etc. should not be consistently dominant. Because these are first-round picks. These are extremely talented players. And even individually, you see them showcase that talent throughout games and on the tape. Right? So that you have how many first-round picks on this defense? You really think about it. I mean, the entire front 7 might be a first-round pick besides McDuffie at linebacker. Like, they have multiple first-round picks at cornerback. They have a first-round pick or a high second-round pick in McKinney now at safety. So you think about all the talent they have put to this defense, and now maybe a coach able to capitalize on that through a change in scheme, more creativity, more flair to the defense, which I think is needed in the NFL. I think your defense needs to be able to provide some things that throw off an offense and be able to give a chess match to the offense in a Steve Spagnuolo, Bill Belichick, Mike McDonald type fashion in this NFL. You need to be able to counterpunch. You can't just have what you are. You can't just do what you do, right? And I think you look at this defense and the upside is immense because you have elite players at every level. I think Jair at his best is an elite corner. I think that Rashawn Gary at his best is an elite edge player. I think Kenny Clark at his best is an elite interior defensive lineman. I think that Xavier McKinney at his best is an elite safety. And I think Quay Walker has the tools to be a very, very good linebacker. I think at times he's showcased that. He's a little bit, off sometimes, but I like him. I think his movement skills are great. I think his coverage skills are potentially great, but I would like to see them add another linebacker. I'd like to see them add potentially to the safety position again. But they've got pieces. I mean, Eric Stokes, if he stays healthy, I think he's a solid number 2 corner. They've got more depth at the corner position thanks to all the injuries they sustained over the last couple of years. Like Ballentine, these guys coming off the bench that played 846 snaps last year, which was Ballentine. He graded 90th in pro football last year at corner. Ballentine, he was 78th. He played 534 snaps last year. So that's depth, right? That's like your 3rd, 4th, 5th corners. You have Nixon potentially at nickel, who I've liked sometimes, at nickel position. I think he's pretty good. He's got the quickness, and he's just a ball player. Like, he's just got this competitiveness to him. McDuffie, I'm not so sure about at the linebacker position. I'd like to see them upgrade with maybe a veteran there. I know they let go of Devondre Campbell, or maybe they bring in somebody through the draft. But I think they're mostly going to focus their draft on the defense, maybe a little bit on the offensive line. But that's maybe where they're going to be able to kind of smooth out some of those issue areas. But man, I think the defense has a lot of upside because of all the elite talents, as I've mentioned, on all the different positions, because of the change in scheme and potentially the level of creativity that will be brought by the new defensive coordinator. And I think that some of these defensive players are going to hit their stride. Lucas Van Ness, 1st-round pick last year, probably in for a bigger role, probably less on the plate of Preston Smith. I think that Devontae Wyatt's continued to get better every season. I think Quay Walker is going to hit his stride this year. And I think the addition of Xavier McKinney gives them another potential elite piece that's going to help them in the middle of the field of their defense. So, man, I think the Packers are going to be really, really good this year. I think the Lions in their own division is also a contender in the NFC. And I think that these two teams will be going at it all year long. And I think the Packers, they might not be a Super Bowl team this year. They might be, again, a divisional round NFC championship caliber team. I definitely could see that. I think, though, they're on the trajectory. They're on the path. They're on the progress makings of being a Super Bowl team in another year. You think about that Aaron Rodgers run, and he had 2008 to start, right? Then he had 2009, where they made the playoffs. Then they had 2010, where they won the Super Bowl. Maybe Love is on that trajectory, and this roster seems to be on that trajectory. It's not just Jordan Love. It's not just Matt LaFleur. It's all this combination of things that are going for the Packers. It's a young, talented roster. And I think casual fans sleeping on how talented it is. I think it showcased itself last year. Packers are really, really good, and they will punish the NFL in 2024. Thanks for watching. Gronk, spike the like button. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Peace.